Disney has one last profit maker in their entire empire. They've destroyed Marvel, they've destroyed Star Wars, and they're now in the process of destroying the last opportunity they have to make consistent tentpole money. And I don't think they care. We're going to talk about it though. Here we go. Disney's live action empire is crumbling, and the receipts just, well, they don't lie. From Mufasa the Lion King crawling its way to a $700 million global performance, well, that was about the last straw. And it's possible it didn't even make money. But it started off with probably one of the most dismal opening weekends at $35 million that I think I've ever seen. I mean, talk about a gut punch. If you look back at the video that we put out on December 24th, Christmas Eve, we got 15,000 people taking a look at a video proving you all are interested in watching Disney fail. You like a good flop. Now, Snow White's $200 million gamble, which I've been talking about plenty here on this channel, is staring down that measly $60 million debut. It even gets there. There's a chance it could perform in the 40s, and that would be even worse. X is roasting the CGI. Nobody really seems to like those versions of the dwarves. And Rachel Zegler is a giant PR fumble fest. She's constantly dropping the ball everywhere, and she doesn't even mind having Disney try to pick it up. So what's the next domino to drop, you ask? Well, spoiler, even Moana 2's billion-dollar performance can't bail out the sinking ship, because with the kind of money that Disney's spending on these, they need them to consistently perform and not fall apart coming out the gate. We got to get this party started, so here we go. Before we start the video, though, we just need to remind you very quickly, I'm trying to get to 100K this year, so look down below, right down there, see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, click the subscribe button. Whether you're here for your first or your 1,000th time, we know you're going to love the material that you see here. So go ahead and hit the like button while you're down there, hit that notification bell, and turn on all notifications, because that way you don't miss anything, whether it be 1 to 3 videos per day or 1 to 3 live streams. Who knows? You're going to get at least some of those each and every day. And without further ado, let's jump into the fact that Disney may be having another dying profit center, and that will be that at that point. First, let's start with Mufasa's misfire. As we called it early on in December, that film was going to struggle, and it did, with an opening around the Christmas holiday that just basically destroyed the opportunity for it to reach that billion-dollar threshold. With only $35 million, that's a pathetic start for a film that cost over $300 million. It limped to $721 million worldwide eventually, after Disney left it in theaters forever, but fan reaction wasn't very positive, with many people calling it a CGI snooze fest. Those are not my words. I just called it a complete waste of time and money. That's different, I think. Worse yet, it was characterized as Lion King fan fiction, and it wasn't very good. It also kind of destroyed some of the lore, but I don't even care about that, to be fair. This film and its eventual performance is kind of like Schadenfreude, and we experience a lot of that recently because of Disney, because we're almost rooting for their failure now, which is kind of sad. I mean, at this point, I would say that maybe Disney's golden touch is rusting, or rust, but to have something like this fall apart, you've got real problems. Take a look at what's happening with Disney's Snow White, which releases in just a few days. If you watched today's earlier video, which you can find right up there, you know that it's headed for complete disaster, and Disney's already waving the white flag on the film's overall fate, which obviously is going to be a flop. So let's fast forward to what those expectations are and how much it cost, because at over $200 million, well over $200 million, the film needs somewhere between the $600 and $750 million range to break even. And that may be something that you're hearing regularly on this channel, probably nowhere else, but there's no faking the financial documents coming out of the UK, because they actually track this stuff per production there so you can receive your tax credits. And before we ventured even to the end of 2023, they're well over £200 million in on that film. And by the way, pounds are a little more valuable than dollars. But let's return to the heart of the matter. While people like myself are going to see this film on March 20th, and of course I will be doing a review here on the channel after I'm done, the film technically opens on the 21st, which means we'll see weekend box office numbers that will reflect what the projections are going to be for that opening weekend. And a lot of people don't expect much. You have projections as low as 43 million, as high as 53 million. And it sounds like 50 million is kind of the divide that most people are landing on. If it actually gets to 60 million, everybody's going to jump up, throw their arms up, and yell, yippee! Because that's going to be unexpected, even by Disney themselves. And we can certainly point blame, at least for this film, at one of the co-stars, Rachel Zegler. Her bad PR drove this saying into the ground, and her 2022 Variety dig at the 1937 film, or I should say digs because it was more than one, really didn't resonate well. I mean, nobody wants to think of the handsome young prince being a stalker. Well, except for Rachel Zegler. And I'm kind of starting to question her previous relationships and whether or not her parents were monitoring that dating environment. Hopefully. I don't know, though. And of course, post-election, she wasn't very nice to Trump voters either, or Donald Trump for that matter, but I'm not sure he would care. And I'm not saying live action is totally dead. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing Lilo and Stitch myself. That live action remake looks like it still has heart. But that's more than what I could say it looks like this Snow White film has. It's just really important to be able to reutilize their older material because, well, they don't have any creativity anymore and they need something to fall back on. And honestly, if they would just stick with shot-to-shot remakes of all these live-action efforts, they would be fine. It's the insertion of a lot of bologna sausage that people don't take kindly to. But enough of what we already know. Let's talk about some analysis. You see, starting all the way back in 2010 with Alice in Wonderland, live-action remakes kind of became the bread and butter for Disney. I know it doesn't seem like it, but that film performed very, very well. With a budget of $150 to $200 million, the worldwide box office ended up being over $1 billion. So the film was highly profitable and kind of shed light on what was possible if they stuck with something that was actually familiar. And they didn't deviate too much from the characterization or the story, which it did a little bit, but not enough to bother anyone. Next came 2015's Cinderella, which went gangbusters, over $1 billion, over $543 million at the end of the day, on a budget that was around $95 million. So, relatively cheap, and an opportunity for them to cash in, once again, with a more reasonable and manageable budget. In fact, rumors are it had about $300 million profit, which is, well, strong returns. But again, with a sense of responsibility when it came to that budget number. Jungle Book was next up in 2016, did really well. $175 million budget, $966.6 million worldwide theatrical release. Again, very profitable, $350 to $400 million in total cost to $500 to $600 million in profit. They did really, really well, as a matter of fact, and it kind of set the stage for what the expectation would be at that point. Next, we roll around to 2017's Beauty and the Beast, and this one was set to be a banger from the very beginning. At somewhere between $160 and $250 million in budget, this thing made $1.26 billion, with profitability, well, at nearly $1 billion all by itself. In fact, we could probably guarantee about $750 million if we wanted to be very conservative about it. And lastly, the last big-time performer, Aladdin, in 2019. On that budget of $183 million, you ended up a little over $1 billion in overall performance. A very, very profitable movie indeed, likely with over $1 billion in profitability. I mean, even with the theatrical cut of about 50% of all of those numbers we just went through, Disney was making out like a bandit. And they thought the gravy train would never run out. But it did. In 2019, they also tried to release Dumbo, and that film, well, didn't do very well. And in less kind words, it bombed. On a $170 million plus budget, it only earned $353.3 million at the box office. It easily lost somewhere around $50 to $100 million, depending upon what the actual marketing campaign was. And the only ones that made out on this particular movie were the theater owners. In the beginning of what we would like to call underperforming. Another one of those underperformers was the 2020 remake of Mulan, an ill-advised live-action remake since the cartoon was so beloved and played well both in the States and around the globe, in particular China. And with a $200 million plus budget, the film had adjusted performance of $550 million. Why adjusted, you ask? Well, it only had a worldwide revenue of $69.9 million. Why? Because we just entered the COVID crisis here in the United States and around the world. And unfortunately, the majority of theaters had closed up due to undue caution. So, in a rare instance, and right after the launch of Disney Plus, we had a Disney Plus release on top of it, which Disney claims gave them additional revenue of $60 to $100 million. We have no way to verify that, but hey, maybe it's true. The loss projected for that one was staggering, somewhere between 200 and 300 million, and I'm more likely to believe 300 million if you were to ask me. This was the biggest remake flop of all, but it has an asterisk. Why? Well, because there was a global crisis around the world that was taking everybody's mind off of watching Mulan. And while there were others in between, starting all the way back in 2014, they never really resonated with anybody or made the impact that they needed to be standouts as a tentpole in Disney's arsenal of films that were being released every single year. From the early successes of 2010 to 2017 to the peak of profitability, which was 2019, despite a couple of big damage losses. Your recent struggles only started to show up since 2020. And since then, not only has it been hit or miss, it's been net loss if you look at the total amount of profitability. Mulan, obviously, higher budget. The Little Mermaid, extremely high budget, over $250 million at the end of the day. But the theatrical returns were the things that were really bad, considering that, to my memory, only 2 films released with any kind of day-and-date premiere access, like Mulan and, of course, Marvel's Black Widow. After that, Disney just kept the lid on the films they needed to be profitable and released them later on when theaters reopened around the country and around the world. And if anything, I pay attention to trends, and the trend right now is not positive. With an overall profitability margin that is enviable with everything that's been released, 18 in all since 1996, 12 of those had significant profit, or really good profit, decent profit. However, you look at Dumbo, Mulan, Cruella, and Little Mermaid, things recently have not been going well, including Mufasa, because if you look closely at it, it likely only at best broke even. Because again, you have to remember, 50% of the money coming in as profit is, well, profit for the theaters, not for Disney. And the 3 trend lines that I see are as follows. I see rising budgets of any recent film, especially very recent films, exceeding the $200 million hard cap that I would set for any kind of a production. Films at that level have to not only double what they're going to have to make in order to reach break even, they oftentimes have to triple because of the huge expense of the marketing budgets that have to be thrown out there to promote the movie. In fact, a good rule of thumb these days is to take whatever the film actually costs, the actual spend, and multiply it times 2.8 in order to find the break-even point. That's pretty good rule of thumb, and it'll probably keep you safe when you're trying to estimate whether or not something made money. The second trend line that I find disturbing is the diminishing returns since, well, 2019, or just after the big performances of 2019. The Lion King crossed $1 billion, while the others hovered around 200 to 570 million, reflecting either audience fatigue, competition from a streaming environment, which is something that started to factor in all the way back in 2017, and an over-reliance on CGI. While computer-generated images in film do help build a film out, they shouldn't be relied on purely, as a lot of times you're entering uncanny valley for a majority of your viewing time. And lastly, a big part of diminishing returns is the abandonment of a shot-for-shot remake. That seems to be a major factor here when you're playing on nostalgia, and too much deviation or a change in, let's say, a musical number will definitely be off-putting to most audiences because they came here to see the live-action version of something that they already love. And you're giving them something else and serving them fish instead of the steak that they came for. And finally, it's the reinforcement or the forcing of cultural shifts, the social engineering aspects that Disney and other filmmakers have been trying to inject into the movie-going public, which I don't have to tell you, audiences are not keen on. In fact, get angry and then stop going to see any of your films altogether. I shouldn't have to point out that with the changes in the economy and, of course, massive, rampant, runaway inflation, cinemas should be collecting more money than ever, and they're just frankly not. If anything, there are probably 25 to 35% less butts in seats than there were in 2019. And this is all Hollywood's fault, or their institutional investors' fault. Undeniable. And if you look at the audience response, both here in the US and globally, that film suffered for it and likely lost about $50 million. And as much as I'd like to say that the market was just too large, it really wasn't. These films in recent years haven't faced the kind of competition that they've had in the past. And those films did phenomenal. Right now, you're hard-pressed to find a film that'll just reach the billion-dollar threshold, and when you do, it seems to be something rather special and something that doesn't rely on the social engineering aspects of cultural change, which, as I said before, nobody wants. It would be easy to come up with a conclusion to say that people are just off of Disney. And while that might be true, it should be argued that live-action remakes have historically been a profitable venture. But when you deviate or change any of the major aspects to what it is people come to see, they react negatively and they tell everybody else. And that brings me to my final part of a conclusion, which is in today's theatrical world, you absolutely need positive word of mouth. And probably since about 3 years ago, I can firmly say that not all attention is good attention. You need positive attention. In Disney, you're not getting it. I'm afraid with Snow White, and probably a few other things that you have coming up, with the exception of Lilo and Stitch, are going to suffer for that as well. But hey, I've rambled on long enough. What do you think? Do you think Disney has anything left in the tank when it comes to Marvel, Star Wars, or any of these live actions? And truly, what are your expectations for Snow White and Lilo and Stitch? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And as always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands because it's good hygiene. It's cold and flu season, guys. And until next time, see ya for real.